Welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am one of your three hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined, as always, by Mr. Kendall Mursky, and joined by the globe-trotting, very busy, very tired Erik Turner, all over the place the last couple of weeks. You were in Vegas live for the draft with Mr.
Yes.
Greg Thompson and Mr. Aaron Quinn, and we are very happy to have you back in the film room, the original film room trio, as we are.
Yes.
You provided some awesome content down there in Vegas. How was the experience being credentialed and being there live and repping the brand?
Well, from a fan perspective, it was awesome. I mean, the access that we got, obviously behind the scenes using the media credentials. But as a fan, I mean, it's the best place to have a draft. I mean, it's Vegas, first of all. So like flying in and touching down in Vegas, like you got goosebumps and, the hairs on the back of my neck raised up because that was exciting to be there as a fan. And just the whole atmosphere. There's just a buzz there having the draft there. Obviously a great city to host the draft too, just because there's something for everyone, right? It's Vegas. So it was fun from a fan perspective. The media perspective, was kind of disappointed, to be honest, man. So you're sitting in this big ballroom and there's two projectors and like everyone's, there's some people set up the podcast. There's people set up with their computers typing things out. And the internet sucked. The Wi-Fi sucked, guys. Like
that's
I would take a 10-second video or, a video of the guys and like you couldn't send it out through the Wi-Fi because there's just not enough bandwidth.
Oh my God.
And of course they had like the tables hardwired. But who has those connectors nowadays?
Yeah.
Like who has an Ethernet connector? So from a media perspective, it was kind of disappointing. It was cool the different areas we could go to as media. But as a fan, it was top notch. And the guys at bookseats.com took care of us. We say that Resorts World, a brand new, casino and hotel right on the strip for those few nights. And I got to hang out with the boys and set up some business stuff, but it was a great time to go. But I'm actually excited to be back in the film room with you guys.
We're excited to have you. It's been, you've been all over the place doing so many different individual videos from stuff with Charlie Kohler to Rashad White to all the different cut-ups, and you've been trying to do everything you can, and the content's been great. And Kendall and I have been holding down the film room at times by ourselves, but we are very excited to have you back here with us, especially in one piece, getting back here from Vegas, which is fantastic. Yeah, and Kendall, I'm still super exhausted. How do you feel after all the hours of coverage last week, all the film cut-ups? Like the draft is over, but
voices sound good. Your voices sound good, right?
I've been drinking a lot of tea, trying to stay, trying to keep the old pipes ready and raring to go. But Kendall, how do you feel? How, are you recovered yet? Are you still worn down? What's going on in your world?
I mean, I feel like I'm officially recovered in terms of sleep. I mean, I've had one day off of live shows in the past 9 days, so pretty busy. But I gotta imagine in terms of sleep schedule and just exhaustion, I feel like Erik's got me beat just from the travel alone.
Yeah, probably. It's been crazy, and I think with everything combined, I wanted to ask you guys both of those questions as we led in, because I just think, granted, I'm probably plugging the network and people are going to think I'm biased, but nobody did it like we did it last week when it came to the draft, whether it was boots on the ground in Vegas, whether it was shows and analysis back home, also shows and analysis from Erik, Aaron, and Greg in Vegas. I don't think anybody did what we did in terms of both quantity and in terms of quality. I am just so proud of how we showed up as a collective unit last week in a variety of ways. Everybody just grinding and putting out work and the products. Yeah, it was tremendously fun. And the reviews were great from people and fans tweeting at us and supporting the shows in a variety of ways. It was a tremendously humbling experience last week. And, I'm tremendously grateful and appreciative of it. The draft is, I know I communicated around already. When the Chargers signed Bryce Callahan, man, I'm just, their offseason has been, I saw it and I threw my pen. I was like, no,
probably put a hole in the wall with that pen.
I could have thrown it right through the drywall. Could have thrown it through the concrete if I was outside. The Chargers had a sneaky good offseason, and an interesting draft as well. But yeah, last week was awesome, and now we come into this week and start to, the dust has fully settled, and so we come here into this film room episode focusing on the Bills' first pick, the 23rd pick overall, who the Buffalo Bills traded up to acquire, Mr. Kaiir Elam. I'm waiting for myself to call him Matt Elam, like his uncle,
I
who
know,
the Ravens
right?
drafted all those years ago. I'm waiting. Oh yeah, I did have
You had a moment?
because I've said it all along. Like, I like Elam, but he was corner
Meh.
7,
Meh.
and
Yeah.
I've still
Yeah.
maintained the whole thing from the get go. Like, I didn't like his 2021 tape. I liked his 2020, but again, the Bills have squeezed so much blood from all these UDFA and late round draft pick stones. Imagine what they could get out of Matt Elam.
Yeah.
Boom. Thank you so much, John. Yes, we did. Cover One did rock the draft in a variety
By
of
the way,
fashions.
Ant, you just did it. You said Matt Elam.
Oh, Kaiir Elam. God.
That's once.
It's over.
That's
I'm out.
once.
I'm done. It's gonna happen way more. It's gonna happen so much. Same thing with like when I call Brian Robinson, James Robinson throughout the entire offseason.
Yeah,
I'm
you
doing
did
it,
that
like,
a lot. Yeah.
I'm falling apart. It's a lot of draft
James
coverage.
and Dalvin.
Oh yeah, I can't wait till I call James Cook,
Dalvin
Dalvin Cook. It's gonna or Brian Cook, the safety from Cincinnati. Like, it's gonna happen at some point. I've accepted it. Also, what we have accepted is how excited we are about Kaiir Elam, not Matt. Erik, someone who, we wanted to highlight in tonight's episode because of what he potentially brings to this team physically with his traits and his attributes, but also what he brings in between the ears and what he's got going on mentally. Like, there's a lot to like, not just from like, oh, this is our guy now, so we have to like him, let's rep him, haha. No, like, there's a lot to like when you put on the tape, really grind and study him, and you combine that with the metrics and also what you see and hear from him when he speaks.
Yeah, and it's you said he was your 7th corner, on your board. But that's the thing, as people that just watch film like ourselves, like, we don't get the character interviews and the time to meet these guys. That evaluation is quite possibly the most important evaluation.
Sure.
Teams are investing in these guys and hoping that they can grow, especially a guy as young as Kaiir, hoping that they can grow in their system and as players. And so, when we see these videos of him at the combine, or even some of the interviews at the podium at the combine, like behind the scenes stuff from the Bills, like, I mean, coaches, the strength staff, everyone in the building at One Bills Drive, when they saw that, they're like, okay, we understand why you went and drafted this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And as fans, we're like, oh my goodness, like, yes, we're totally on board with this, because that's the stuff that, coaches, they love. They absolutely love. And, we're going to talk about a little later about, the Bills liking those type of players that come from professional families. But a guy as young as him to be talking like that, you see some of those traits coming out behind the scenes and why he tested so well, according to some of the teams in the league, when it came to interviews, when it came to his character, when it came to his football IQ. So to see some of that stuff behind the scenes, we love it, and we wish we had more access to it.
Oh, we were talking about it earlier in the DM. Like, I wish there was like all 22 film of the behind the scenes, like there is for game tape. And yeah, Erik, you're spot on. Like, and one thing with Elam, I think leading into it, we started hearing in like March and early April that Elam was just crushing interviews with teams at the combine left and right, and just how professional he sounded. And that mental piece is so huge, right? Like, everybody who gets to the NFL is talented. They're big and they're fast and they're strong and they know football and they can play like that. They all have that. Granted, there's varying levels and degrees of that, of course, but the mental game is really what separates the weak from the strong. It's what allows you to progress to those next levels. Your understanding of the game, but also your understanding of what it takes to succeed in the NFL on the field and off the field, how you have to prepare, how you have to approach the game, what you do as a person and as a player and as a professional. That's what separates the weak from the strong, that grind and how you embrace it and how you approach things. And Kendall, that was something, to harken back to what Erik said, that's something that we mentioned a couple of times, both live on draft night and then when you and I did that breakdown of Kaiir Elam, how much that culture piece and that fit really started to sway things for us the more we started to learn about him and how important that is to this team and what it means for him as an individual player in terms of how likely he is to reach his ceiling, which is very high.
Yeah, I mean, you think of guys like Josh Allen and, the fears of drafting Josh Allen. It's like, oh, what is that floor relative to that outstanding ceiling, and will he ever reach that ceiling? And we see here now 4 or 5 years later, like, he's able to even sniff that ceiling because of how he's wired, because of his work ethic, all of those little things. And Yeah, we talk about how like Ant and I had him ranked as corner 7. If we knew all of this stuff about his character, there's no way he would have been corner 7 for us.
Right. Yeah,
And
exactly.
Brandon Beane even mentioned about it in his press conference after day 1. Quote, culture is important to us, and that's why we put him in the first round as a first round grade. And that to me kind of like it gives a peek behind the curtain towards like how Ant and I graded him as maybe a fringe first rounder based on just the tape alone. But imagine if we had that character bit, then we would have
Yeah.
felt a lot more confident about him reaching that ceiling that I think we both saw. I don't want to speak for you, Ant, but we both saw on
No,
the
agreed.
tape. And then if we knew that culture and that work ethic and all of that stuff was a fit, it's like, oh yeah, he can reach that. And not to be mentioned, I mean, he's turning 21 in 2 days. Like he's
a
a
baby.
very young dude. He's gonna grow into it. I gotta imagine he could still probably put some weight on if he really had to. I don't think he
Yes.
needs to or anything, but he could if he wants to, or if the coaching staff wants him to. This dude has room to grow. And
Yep.
his tape, I gotta say, I told it to you, Erik, in the DMs today. Going back through all the tape today, obviously with the Homer goggles on, I gotta, try to separate that a little bit. But it's amazing how well he did prior to the injury he suffered against Alabama this past year. He was like so much more twitchy and athletic in his movements. And then the second that injury hits, you can kind of see some sluggish nature in his movements and just how he's covering. Even the way that Florida was using him, it almost seemed like he went to the sideline and he was like, look, I'm not going to be able to do all these things. We got to put me in off zone a little bit more, things like that, where he can't do that reactive athleticism stuff in his press man coverage and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to turn into, not only this year, but far beyond this year.
Yeah, same. I think honestly that's a sentiment that's echoed by all of us, seeing what he can turn into. And again, that culture piece is huge. What you got going on between the years, it's something that I talked about with why I like Trent McDuffie so much. You hear him speak in these interviews and at the combine and different things, and people just kept raving about his football intelligence and his professionalism and how he approached the game. And it was part of the reason that made me like McDuffie. And it's something that's really made me like Elam. The more we've heard Beane talk about him, the more we've seen these behind the scenes videos and clips. He's just such an impressive human being. In just in terms of being a person, but also in terms of how he approaches the game. So many people coming in talking about the Notebook clip, like, yeah, that was just awesome. Like, how do you not fall in love with that? We know McDermott and Beane did, but it's just so easy to fall in love with something like that. And again, that in between the years piece is a huge reason why he was drafted, but also, Erik, is what he brings on the field from his skill set and his traits, what he allows the Bills to do potentially on the field in their coverage schemes, particularly with being able to play a little bit more man-to-man, which is something the Bills did to a high success clip in the regular season, but then when faced with some different matchups, struggled a little bit in the playoffs.
Yeah, obviously the Bills added a position of need at cornerback in the first round by adding Elam, but not just because of the quantity of corners that they had or the quality of corners that they had, but they needed guys that could kind of augment their scheme a little bit, augment the athleticism a little bit. And so we're looking at the man coverage stats for the Bills. And obviously the Bills are a zone heavy team. And you can see some of these statistics, man coverage 29% of the time last year, which was ranked 11th in the regular season. And a lot of people think that, okay, they didn't quite have the athletes. They obviously didn't have Trey White. Hey, like they couldn't play man coverage. Well, no, they actually did really well, as Anthony said, in the regular season. I mean, yards per attempt, 6.2, that was 5th overall. Completion percentage against was 46.4% when in man coverage. That was ranked 2nd. You can see some of these other stats. EPA per play was negative 0.19, which was the 3rd best. Interceptions, they had 5 in man coverage, which was the 7th most. And QBR against was 61.5%, the 2nd most when in man coverage. So you can see in the regular season, overall, they actually played pretty well in man coverage statistically when you look at some of those advanced stats, courtesy of Sports Info Solutions. But Kendall, talk about once the playoffs hit and what they look like then.
I mean, I think a big thing that we have to keep in mind, these playoff stats, they get a little bit worse. And by a little bit worse, I mean, they get worse. They get worse. But what we should keep in mind is that, of course, they didn't have Trey White. And not having Trey White does present some issues in terms of scheme versatility on the defensive side of things and players that are able to play above the scheme. So now you get a guy like Kaiir Elam, and it allows you to do different things. Leslie Frazier can scheme up different ways to use him against 3x1 sets, and they can, maybe Trey could play on the one side of those 3x1 sets. Maybe Elam could play on that side of 3x1 sets. And it gives you some mix and match possibilities when both of them are on the field at the same time. And furthermore, of course, if Trey doesn't make it back early this season, it gives you that ability to have someone to fill in right away. But I think the big thing with these playoffs the playoff stats and how it took a dip, not only is it not having Trey, but it's also the bump up in competition. It's also the caliber of wide receivers that they were playing in the playoffs relative to the regular season, and having someone as athletic as Kaiir Elam, someone that has shown some really good stuff in off zone coverage where he shows that closing speed, which we'll get to later, but he also shows the ability to mirror match coverages in a really, really sound way. So I think it presents a lot of scheme versatility on the back end.
And that's something that we've talked about this offseason. It wasn't even that, because the Bills are a versatile secondary as a group. You see there by the numbers, like they play man to a pretty high clip from a success rate and total. They also play zone. They mix in 2 high safety looks, single high safety looks. The issue, to Kendall's point, is when they come up against those premier athletes at the wide receiver position, it gets harder because they've traditionally had a corner 2 with more physical limitations. As great as Levi was, he was structurally sound. He was that proverbial guy who was in the right place in the right time. He did his 111th, but there's only so much you can do when you're coming up and you run a 4.6 40 and the guy you're going against runs like a 4.3 or a 4.4, or he's bigger and much stronger. And that doesn't mean you can't win, but it means your technique has to be so on point, because if you if you false step in the slightest way, if your hand placement on a jam or a reroute isn't on point, you can easily get blown by and run by. And Erik, something that we talked about earlier in the DMs was that type of caliber of athlete is now prevalent in the regular season for the Bills this year. Yeah. Miami with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. The Bills play the Cincinnati Bengals this year, and we know the studs, the triplets that they have with Chase, Boyd, and Higgins. There are a lot of receivers who are just phenomenal athletes, either from a physically imposing perspective, from size and strength, or from a speed perspective. So having someone like Elam allows you to fight fire with fire a little bit because of the traits that he possesses, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys talked about it, in the playoffs especially, they couldn't call man coverage as often because they were physically outmatched. They were athletically outmatched. And getting a guy like Elam, you don't have to play as much off coverage, which, we're getting some questions about how the pass rush is going to help the coverage. It absolutely is. And that's why having a guy like Elam and Trey White, when he comes back, they don't have to be off the line of scrimmage. They have the athleticism to play up near the line of scrimmage, to press them, to be tight and in the hip of those wide receivers, regardless of who it is, to shrink those passing windows on top of, obviously, the pass rush, hopefully creating pressure and getting home. So you're just, again, you're incrementally adding to the defense by getting a guy like Elam. They can play less too high coverages, something that the Bills did a lot last year to kind of overcome Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace's athleticism or lack thereof, was play too high coverages a little more and have those all-pro safeties back there, covering up and some of the mistakes that happen on the backside. So Elam does add in that department. Ned, appreciate the donation, first of all. Appreciate you guys. He says, fantastic draft coverage. After watching the film, how much support did Elam have at the other cornerback spot, pass rush, etc. at Florida? Kendall, you want to start with that?
Well, I know last year he obviously had Marco Wilson, who went to the Arizona Cardinals, and he had great ball skills in college and had a pretty solid first rookie year for Arizona. So that much, it didn't all fall on him in 2020, and then in 2021, you saw more of that kind of get placed on his shoulders. He was squarely CB1, not to say he wasn't, but he was more of a 1A, 1B situation in 2020. In 2021, he was truly the guy on the outside. He was expected to lock it down. And they had, Zachary Carter up front. Yep. But it really wasn't much more beyond that. In 2020, they certainly had a lot more talent around him. And I think that is perhaps why a lot of the shortcomings we saw in 2021 happened, because the supporting cast around him just wasn't as thorough as it was the year before. Something I actually wanted to add to your point, though, Erik, you talked about how the coverage can now help, or the pass rush can help the coverage. I think the fact that Elam can now press so well, I think it helps the pass rush. It disrupts the timing of things, and it helps those guys to get to the quarterback faster by disrupting that timing element. So I'm excited for all the possibilities.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's a great compliment. As you said, he's able to get up in the face and press and mirror and disrupt the timing, which is what he said at the combine, at the podium. He said, I'm so athletic and I can play up in a guy's face and play with confidence that I can disrupt the timing of a passing route, a passing concept. So, yes, he's able to match up with opposing receivers. The Bills are so used to, against those top receivers, just having Trey White shadow that guy, right?
Yeah.
And then they have to figure out how to pick up the pieces on the rest of with the rest of the secondary and linebackers. Well, guess what? Frazier doesn't have to do that anymore when both of these corners are healthy. You don't have to trade, because basically, like Elam, if he reaches his potential, is going to be one of the top corners in this league. Like, he is going to be similar to Trey White in many ways. So, I think it's just a great compliment to add. Obviously, a position in need, but athletically and culture-wise, it's just a perfect fit.
It really is, and I think that's something that even, Erik, you mentioned my corner ranking for him, and I know Kendall and I both shared that in terms of, having him be corner 7, but I think something that was maintained throughout all of it, again, was if he can hit that ceiling. And the Bills are a team that, especially in the secondary, they get players to raise their floor, and then they raise those ceilings as well. And there's just so much to like for the on-field potential that he offers. Again, he's now like a chess piece, a versatile component that allows the secondary and the defense as a whole to be more unlocked. They can fight fire with fire. There's more chess piece matchup. You can throw rock, paper, and scissors. They no longer potentially are coming into matchups where they can only throw rock, and more importantly, where teams know they can only throw rock against us. They can't throw paper. And if they throw paper, we're going to throw scissors and they're done. Now they can start to rotate all three, which statistically increases their odds of winning because of what they can do on the field. And that's what we're going to do in this episode, is highlight those on the field pieces of Kaiir Elam in terms of what he does and what he brings. But the first clip that we wanted to bring up in tonight's episode of the Film Room is something that, again, highlights that mental side, that culture fit when it comes to Kaiir Elam, and something that just ticks all the boxes from a professional standpoint that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane look for.
Yeah, and we kind of alluded to it at the top of the show. The Bills and teams across the NFL love players that come from pedigree, that come from families that have players in the league. You heard Anthony talk about Matt Elam, his uncle, who played at Florida as well, and with the Ravens. His father, Abram Elam, played several years in the NFL. And so teams like these players, and you saw the reaction by McDermott and being in that room when he was they're doing their interview with Elam, and how they reacted to him. But it's just something that these teams love, because these guys understand how to be professionals. Obviously, he aced that interview, and I'm sure 31 other interviews at the combine and throughout this draft process. But they understand how to be a pro, whether it's taking care of their body. I saw an interview at the combine with Elam talking about, why or how he takes care of his body with acupuncture, stretching early in the morning, every single day. They just understand how to take care of their body, in recovery, ice baths, all that stuff. Like, he just knows the routine and what it takes to, play in the NFL because of his family members. And so, they also teach these guys how to watch film, like us junkies, like different things to look for as a player. And we're going to play an interview here from Kaiir Elam of him talking about one of the interceptions. So this was a post-game presser. He's talking about what he saw. He was asked about what he saw on this play. So we're going to take a listen to this interview, and then we're going to take a look at the play and show you what happened.
It was something I watched on film all week. When they get in the red zone, they like to, when the slots are on and off, they like to do double move. He tried to do a slant go, and I had my head back for the ball, made a play.
And so what he's talking about is whether the slot's on or off. So you see they're on the fringe of the red zone. They're just outside the 20-yard line right there. And he's basically telling us that, sometimes depending on how this guy aligns, that'll kind of key what type of play or route concept you're going to have. Usually if this guy's on, you're getting like a smash concept right here with this receiver running an in-breaking route. So there are different formations, alignments, splits that kind of key certain concepts, whether they're to the field or to the boundary. On here, you're going to see, as you said, he saw on film when they got into the red zone that they like to run double moves. And watch him on this play, guys. You see him impressed near the line of scrimmage. He's very patient, as we're going to talk about all night. And that receiver kind of goes to the middle of the field like he's going to run, 1 to 3 yard slant, but it's kind of lazy. And he sees it from a mile away. And you see him right here. Instead of getting right into the hip pocket of the wide receiver, what's he do? He kind of backs off. He's like, nope, I see it coming. You see, he gives him distance, kind of gives him distance and says, no, you're going deep. I'm not falling for that slant and go. And he's able to get into the hip pocket right at the 10-yard line and then go up and get the ball for the interception.
I love this one. This is one of those proverbial, like he almost runs the route for the receiver because he knows what's coming. And this is, Erik, you said it, this is that professionalism piece showing, right? Obviously the physical tools to be able to have the alignment and the speed and the athleticism and how smooth he is to be able to carry this route and then execute at the catch point. But for me, the true highlight again is tying it in with that clip that we led off with of he knew what to do here because of film prep and because of study. This is one of those things that separates the good from the great, being able to recognize things on the fly in the moment. And it's so much easier to execute physically when you know mentally what is going to happen. And Kendall, as Erik said, we're film junkies. We grind. Elam grinds too. And it really pays off in moments like this, especially situationally.
Yeah, I think it's funny because you kind of juxtapose this with what Levi Wallace was, and he was someone who processed very well, and he knew, like you said, being in the right place at the right time. And what we're getting with Elam is someone with that similar level of preparation and processing ability, but then you match it with the athleticism where you don't necessarily have to be a step ahead of your game because you'll fall behind because you don't have the athleticism. He has both. He has both where he can be a step ahead of the game in terms of processing and another second step ahead of the game with athleticism. So he's got a lot to work with in terms of how far ahead of the game he can be at this next level.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's that mental piece tied in with that physical. And that first play that we brought up again for everyone was really to tie in showcasing some more of that culture fit in terms of how he prepares and how he sees the game and what he does. And now, Erik, we dive into more of the traits piece, the physical piece, the chess piece that is Kaiir Elam to this defense. And that's where we wanted to go with this episode, is showcasing the traits that he possesses that are needed for this Buffalo Bills defense to take them from a good defense overall and in certain situations, but to more of a matchup proof defense when push comes to shove.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about 2020 film here, 4th down stop here by Elam on Devontae Smith to the top of the screen. And I love this play, not just because of the mental toughness and obviously the level of competition across from him here, but because this is one of those plays where you're not asking Levi Wallace to trail Devontae Smith across the field. Like you just can't do that. Like you literally could not do that and expect for Wallace to work through the traffic like Elam does here out in front of him. Look, he sees everything out in front of him. He avoids Mechie coming across on the mesh there. And he still has the speed to leverage Smith across the field to stop this 4th down play. Like you weren't able to do this with guys like Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. So I just love the athleticism here against top tier competition, which he did for several years.
Devontae Smith won the Heisman this year, and he was in this year of 2020, when this clip is from. He dominated the competition. Alabama was unstoppable, and just seeing Elam go toe to toe with a guy like that. And Erik, you hit my biggest takeaway from this. Elam avoiding the trash and maintaining leverage. Like it's easy to get caught up and run into your own man or run into the Alabama receiver that's trying to pick you, but not really pick you. And it's easy to lose a step, lose leverage, lose an angle, but he's got the functional intelligence and awareness to not get caught up in any of that nonsense. And then boom, here it is. Like Smith can fly. Like this is an absolute burner. And because of Elam's awareness combined with what he possesses physically, he's able to stay on top, maintain leverage. And then Kendall, he comes up and makes a really nice tackle and finishes, which is something that honestly we were skeptical of, his finishing and his tackling in a variety of situations.
Yeah, but that's what's so impressive about this play. It's all of it coupled together where he has the awareness to avoid Mechie and he takes separation away. Like he gives Smith's separation in this and has the athleticism to keep the leverage of the entire play and still have a proper pursuit angle to the ball carrier. There is so much to like about this play, and you tie it back to the Buffalo Bills and how, when you're running man coverage with Levi or Dane, you're kind of hoping that you don't see a mesh concept. You're hoping you don't see these kind of concepts, because those are things that are just, they're going to be just nightmares for the personnel that we have in the secondary. But when you have Elam, you're not necessarily afraid of certain concepts when you run man coverage. You feel confident enough that he could check all those boxes and mitigate all risk necessary. So I can't stop it, but I really just love the athleticism that it presents in terms of versatility.
Yeah, for sure. So, it's that huge piece, man.
Yeah, and this is another play. We talked about his patience, right, Anthony? And that, the confidence and in your ability to stand at the line of scrimmage versus this type of competition, square a man up, and the patience and confidence is just unreal by Elam here. And he did it in every game he played against Alabama. So you see him at the bottom of the screen here as I let it roll, and just watch how slow he is out of his. So he kick steps right there, and now he's just waiting. And you can see that Jameson Williams is almost faking like he's going to block, and they're going to swing it out to this guy. But Elam doesn't care. He is just patient. He's staring at the midline of Williams there. Right. And so you see as Williams releases, he gets right into his hip, chokes that route along the sideline, takes away all that green. Usually receivers are taught to, hold that red line. It's usually like 2 to 3 yards from the boundary. Yeah, that is taken away from Elam. Again, he gets physical with Williams, who Elam said at the combine was the best wide receiver he's played against in college. So really good patience and understanding of what was happening on this play by Elam.
Jameson Williams is a nonstop threat every single time he's on the field. Bills fans know him well. He was a guy that a lot of Bills fans were hoping would fall to 25 and they could pair him in this offense with Josh Allen. He can fly in every sense of the word. And, Erik, you alluded to some of it. I love the patience. Look where his eyes are. Look where his head is. He's focused. That is fundamental awareness and technique as he just stares like, no, I'm not watching your hands. I'm not watching your head. I'm watching that midline. I got you pegged. And then, again, this is Jameson Williams, a dude who we didn't get to see what he ran the 40 in, but I'm fairly confident that he's the fastest player in this entire draft. And Elam, just something that we talked about offline before the show started, he just seamlessly, smoothly, and athletically just turns upfield. Look at the hip fluidity, his ability to just turn and run, and then also, again, turn, get his head around, locate the football, and Erik, as you said, continue to choke this point for Williams and use that sideline as an extra defender, which is such a huge awareness piece. Like, use that boundary to your advantage if you're the defender, and use it as an extra guy to help you cover a tremendous athlete. This is physical ability and mental awareness tied in all in one play. Kendall, what do you really like about this one?
Well, not only is there the fluidity to his movements, but I find his movements to be super efficient. He doesn't show many wasted movements, and I love that about his game. But Erik, you alluded to the confidence in his athleticism. And when you see it time and time again against Alabama, you're seeing it against lesser competition. And that is such a huge piece of playing the cornerback position. You obviously have to be mentally tough. You have to understand that you're going to get beat at times. But he is so confident in his athletic ability, especially in press man, where he's not really fearful of anyone really stacking him downfield. If he gets beat, he has those efficient, fluid movements to turn his hips and get downfield quickly. And that's where you start to see that sub 4.40 time show itself, because he can recover quickly, man.
And Erik, you highlighted the safety there. Like, this is single high coverage. Like, Elam is on an island against arguably the most dangerous offensive player in college football. He's one-on-one, and this ties into that confidence piece, Kendall, that you're talking about too. Like, you're going up against a dude who can fly, who you yourself know is the toughest cover you're going to have all year. You're one-on-one. There really is not help So you have to mentally and physically execute and be able to take on this monster that you're covering. And he does just such a great job here, basically on an island. And these are those things that you want to see translate to the next level, which will be so helpful for the Bills to know you have a guy that can combat these type of physical traits in wide receivers and not be put at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and here's another one of those plays, right, guys? You know, he's up against Williams, up near the line of scrimmage, and he just, again, he gets into his hip pocket, but he's all over him. And you can see the left shoulder as Elam transitions right here from his left hand to his right hand. Watch that left shoulder of Williams. Look at it. It's getting pushed back. You can see it. He is all over him. He's getting physical with Williams, which is great because if there's one drawback to Williams, it's kind of how, you know, rail thin he is and his play strength. Yeah. So Elam just played right against that weakness and, again, stayed in that pocket. And as you see Williams drop down right there, Elam is right there, eyes up, play on the ball. Just great work by Elam on this play, Kendall.
Yeah, I love the mirror match ability on this play. This is one of those plays that showed me that efficiency in his movements. There's no wasted steps. You know, Williams kind of tries to slow play it and stutter at the start, showing maybe there's just going to be a quick break to the inside on a slant, and it gets broken outside. And like you said, he gets physical with him. Elam does. He gets physical with him, impedes his route. And this perfect time. And I mean, Damian Carter comes in and says he's a little handsy at the end of the route. And I believe he was talking about the prior play. And you can see it on this play as well. Like, yeah, sure, he's getting a little bit handsy. And so I suppose, you know, the next level will be called a bit more, I don't want to say liberally, but it's going to be called more fairly. Yeah.
Depends.
Aggressive. Like, it does. It does completely depend on who the ref is. But regardless, you know, he's going to be more under a microscope when he's playing in the NFL at that level.
And to that point, same things were said about Trey White coming out.
Yes.
He's a little grabby. He's a little handsy. He had, I think, the same amount of penalties as Elam coming out his final year. Something like 7 penalties here and there. Sometimes it gets called, sometimes it doesn't, but more times than not, I mean, we saw Trey White, more times than not, he's going to lock dudes down. And, you know, when guys get physical with him, he's able to use his technique and some of that grabbiness to execute plays like this.
And it gets in the head of wide receivers, you know, playing that physical. And it's like, oh, why isn't this being called? And they start complaining to refs and stuff like that. It gets in the head of wide receivers. So there's an upside and a downside to being that handsy, grabby, physical through the routes, but I do like seeing it, especially against someone like Williams here. Like you said, Eric, that's a weakness of his game. Can he show physicality through the entirety of his routes?
And that's a piece too, Kendall, you mentioned like the mental side of it for the receiver. Even if a receiver draws a flag, right, which is a win for them, they don't really want that. Like, they want the ball. They want to catch it. They want to run. They want to score. Like, yeah, like I drew a flag and got a first down or whatever, but like they want the ball. Like, it's annoying to have this guy, exactly to Justin's point, I'll take too aggressive rather than not aggressive enough all day. That starts to wear on you. Like, if you're getting leaned on like that, you're getting grabbed, you're constantly getting bumped, whether or not you think it's a flag, whether it is called, someone's always just making you work for every single inch. Like, those snaps physically and mentally start to add up for you as a receiver. It's frustrating to go against that kind of guy. And if you are getting the call, especially if you're not, you're like, yo, this guy is all over me. What the hell? And then, especially if he can clean up some of this handsiness and some of this grabbiness, which was something that, you know, Kendall, you and I dinged him for in a couple of episodes this offseason when we talked about the corner class. It's something that if he can clean this up a little, it could really, again, continue to help his game. And what's nice about this, even with the grabbiness, you still see the functional athleticism. You still see the hip fluidity. You still see how smooth he is in this coverage and how responsible he is. Clean up a little bit, or honestly, to Justin's point there, keep it and keep being aggressive and keep getting dudes angry and leaning on them and getting physical and handsy with them. I do think he will have to clean it up, but it's nice to see the variety that he has to his game, especially against a stud all-pro potential receiver from a talent perspective in Mr. Jameson Williams.
Yeah, it's easier to rein in athleticism or aggressiveness than it is to create aggressiveness.
Good point.
Yeah, and here's another one of those plays. Yeah, guys are gonna say, hey, you got a little grabby, but I talked to you guys prior to going live today about how a lot of these things, the grabbiness and how they cut off routes at the top of these routes to the top of the screen here. Like, it was very Trey White-like. I mean, Trey did this all the time when these receivers are trying to break outside and he had outside leverage, he would say, hey, you're going to have to go through me. And some receivers, especially at the college level, don't have that type of strength. You have to play through the big corner, and they're not able to. You see him cut off the route of that wide receiver, and because of that, he's able to get out in front and essentially run the route for the wide receiver and then pick up the interception. So, yes, maybe on Sundays, sometimes this gets called, but I'm sorry, that type of physicality and trust at the line of scrimmage, look at how physical he is.
Yeah, I love
Two-handed
that.
punch, totally. I mean, and honestly, this is not even the best technique. You really shouldn't do this because you're vulnerable, but he has the athleticism, as as Kendall said, you know, kind of like Josh Allen. We'll liken it to Josh Allen. Like, maybe he wasn't processing as fast as he should have been early in his career, but he had the arm strength to overcome it. Things like this, where being a little too aggressive early in a route stem could get him in trouble, Elam in trouble, but he has athleticism. He has a closing speed to get back on top of the route, to stay on top of the route, and even cut off the route versus an inferior competition at wide receiver here. And then, again, get turnovers. And this is what the Bills want from their corners and their secondary this year. They've added more of a pass rush. We talked about the compliments. Now they need guys to start picking off more balls here and creating turnovers for their offense and getting the explosive offense back on the field. Elam is that guy that could help them do that.
You hit it for me, Eric. I get nervous when dudes go for two-hand jams because it's an easy way to get like thrown off kilter. And if you miss or you're not on point, like you're kind of done. He does it decently, like regular in his game, and he wins consistently with it, like at a higher clip than I would expect. And you just see the explosion right away, the punch, like look at that. You freeze framed it perfectly. Like he won this rep already. Like the ball is in the quarterback's hands. He is starting his drop. The receiver still hasn't gotten off the line of scrimmage. The receiver is still stuck in neutral where he should be putting his foot on the gas.
And look at where the
going.
pass rusher is while at that time.
Exactly. It's like we share a brain. This ties in with that comment who mentioned it earlier. I apologies to whoever made the comment of like, oh, like, does the pass rush help with this? And then Erik, what you started talking about, like, yes, what's nice is playing that press ability also helps the pass rush. Now, maybe if the Bills still had Jerry Hughes, maybe some of those pressures would be converted to sacks because the quarterback has to hold on to the ball a little bit more. And when you've got guys, when you've got guys like Von Miller and Ed Oliver who can win one-on-one and who can win quickly, and all of a sudden a quarterback is like, all right, well, I got to get the ball out. And one of the guys that he's trying to get the ball out to is only 2 yards past the line of scrimmage because he got jammed to hell. That's a big thing. This press man ability, the technique, all of it, the mentality, like it's something that, Kendall, we haven't really seen aside from Trey White. And if you can also add it to Trey White, again, as we talked about, it unlocks a lot for this defense.
Yeah, and it's something we both talked about, not only the grabby stuff, but we were concerned about like his inconsistency and how he jabs at the line of scrimmage, because he's clearly got the skill set, he's got the physicality, he's got the mindset, he's got it all. But I think in terms of the technique and how he jams, it could be cleaned up a little bit. And of course, that's coachable. That's not like, oh, ding him, he can't do that. Right. No, that's something that's clearly coachable, and I have confidence that he'll be receptive to that coaching. So yeah, I love the skill set that he presents. And especially, we talked about how, especially in press coverage, how it allows you to play single high and it disrupts the timing of things and allows that safety to get over top of things if you are in single high coverage. And you know, whoever that deep safety is, oh, okay, there's nothing going deep on the right of me, but there is something going deep on the left of me. Oh, it's a good thing Elam pressed that guy up, so now I have time to go cover some space. So I really like the different things that he presents for this defense, especially in press man coverage, something we haven't seen a lot of yet.
Right. And so I think this may be the last play. Again, another physical play at the line of scrimmage, guys. This was from 2019. So this is from a few years ago, but we're going to show some of that physicality at the line of scrimmage and that press ability. And you can see that target down there at the bottom of the screen isn't the smallest guy. It's a pretty even matchup right here. But I want you to watch the kick step right there with that left foot. So you see the kick step. Now his feet are a little outside the frame. And a lot of times, depending on what coach is coaching these DBs, like sometimes that's not a good thing. You always hear Nick Saban talking about getting your feet outside your frame can be trouble for most corners, especially like Levi Wallace, because in order to move left or right or even open your hips, you kind of have to bring one foot in to accelerate and push off. Well, you see how Elam uses his hands to help him do that. So you see the punch right there with his left, but then watch how he motors those feet out and he's able to get his hips around to the wide receiver as he releases outside. But as you guys said earlier, like quarterback, he's 130 there.
To get your eyes up again on the ball and make a play. The functional athleticism. For me, it's the hands on this one. Something that Erik, I talked about with Brandon Thorne on Twitter was how corner receiver battles in one-on-ones with hand technique can often mirror what it looks like in pass rush battles with linemen, offensive versus defensive. And almost like, I love what Elam does on this. It's almost like an offensive lineman, like replacing his hands. Like after like they get beat, you see him get the left and then he turns, replaces it with the right, all in one fluid motion in order to maintain control, in order to maintain leverage. And then Erik, like you said, like that hip fluidity. He's not the twitchiest guy. He's not the quickest in his lower body movement because he does have longer legs, but he's so smooth and he's so fluid and he does have some burst to him. And you see that hip fluidity come in here as he ties it with the hand technique. Like the things for me personally, and I know a lot of us look for in corners, the feet, the hips, the hands, you see all of that to a plus matchup on this play. And then, he's the quarterback is like, well, I'm supposed to throw the goal ball on this play, so I guess I'm going to throw the goal ball. And he throws it to the spot, and there is no spot because of the jam from Elam. And then how he plays it. Look at how, as he's tracking the ball, he's still got a feel of the wide receiver with his left hand. So that way he can mark his man while he's tracking the ball. That is next level professional play on the ball, not from a college corner, from an NFL corner. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. And Kendall, I know Erik and I both talked about things that we like in this play. What's something that you really enjoy when you look at this clip from Elam?
Yeah, to talk about something we haven't talked about, his footwork through this is truly impressive because you can see right off the press, so much of his weight is behind his heels. I don't know how he stayed on his feet through the press technique of this entire route. Like, he looks like he should fall over right there. I don't know how he stays with it, but it is that foot quickness. It's how he's able to regain that balance with how fast his feet are moving in that back pedal. And then, of course, you see it translate out of that with the transition, turning his hips to the outside, and then, of course, the hand fitting. But I love how he kept balance on this play because it looks like there's no human that is capable of keeping balance and staying upright on that play because it looks like all of his weight was completely behind his heels. I found that to be truly impressive, obviously on top of all the things that you guys said.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up. The other thing that maybe we didn't mention, I love the motoring out of his feet. Like you said, Kendall, is ridiculous. But the control, the body control, but also the strength here. When he's punching initially at the line of scrimmage, like that's going to have some force behind it when that receiver's trying to release outside and you see him even try to swat his left hand. Like as Kendall said, he probably should have fallen over, and that takes some strength, that takes some hip and core strength to withstand that. And then again, throughout the route, as he is getting light on his foot and transitioning, just great work. And then at the catch point, the interception. I mean, that's balls in the air. It's his, and he's able to hit it on his fingertips right there for the interception. Just a phenomenal play from Elam here. And it's something that we can't wait for and wait to see in the Bills defense. Cause I mean, Trey White's a technician, but he doesn't have the strength that Elam does, or the size for that matter. And he doesn't affect guys at the line of scrimmage in the same way that Elam can. And it's scary to think that because he's still so young, which is probably why he was a top 30 visitor, which we broke earlier in the week leading into the draft. They got to know his character. Obviously, all the interviews brought him into One Bills Drive. It's exciting to think about this kid's potential.
Yeah, and for me, it's been, again, that rock, paper, scissors analogy. Like the Bills secondary is tremendous. All pros at safety, all pro in Tre'Davious White, but they're not burners. They're not they're overall athletic, but they're not extremely agile or extremely fast or extremely big or strong. They have some of that, but what they are is very technically sound in their feet, in their hands, in their hips, in their understanding of this Bills defense, which we talk about it is vanilla And I think that gets a bad rap. But the reason the Bills are able to play such a vanilla kind of defense is because they execute everything so well. They know their keys, they know their clues, and each player knows how to play off of one another in order to execute. They haven't had someone with this level of physical traits really in this secondary, someone that has the speed, a legit sub 4.4 speed, someone who's got some strength, someone who's got some size, someone who's got scheme versatility, all of this in a package. For me, that is the most exciting thing when it comes to Kaiir Elam, what he enables this defense to do, which has been such a need for this defense and my number one priority this offseason, allowing that defense to maintain that rock, paper, scissors matchability, that scheme versatility to allow you to stay multiple and stay versatile against whatever opponent you face. If you need to play more man, if you need to blitz more and play man behind it, or if you need to go spot drop zone or more pattern matching, whatever have you, big receivers, small, fast ones, strong ones, whatever have you. Elam gives you a bit of that, like we said in the beginning, that ability to fight fire with fire. And it's so exciting. And Kendall, if you had to think or put or hang your hat on something for Elam, what is it, after we've gone through so much film of his leading up to this process, going through draft weekend, and then obviously in preparation for tonight's episode and in the episode, is there any one thing that you really hang your hat on for him that gets you excited? And, what do you think of this draft pick overall as we now sit several days removed from the draft?
Growth. It's growth. It's what could be. Because, obviously there's so much here already that we just showed, but it's also what could be beyond what we just showed. Ned comes in and he asks us, these were all just man press clips. Are we going to school on any zone stuff? And that's the funny thing. We just wanted to emphasize what he does in man and how he's going to offer that rock, paper, scissors ability, that kind of stuff. And that's what's so exciting to me, more so than anything else, to echo what you were saying, Ant. It isn't necessarily what he can do in zone, which he can do. He shows good ability in off zone, close on routes, process routes, all that stuff, jump on them. He shows that. But we wanted to highlight and emphasize the wrinkles that he could add to this defense by offering that press man ability, and not just press man, but also off man. So I think it's really exciting in that sense, just singularly what he adds to this defense with the ability and athleticism to play man coverage and match up in that way and offer Leslie Frazier different creative ways to do things on the back end, even more so than we've seen the past 5-6 years.
It really does. That's an excellent point. And also good comment there. Talking about the zone aspect. Yes, he can click and close and function in that zone world, whether it's spot drop or pattern match like the Bills like to play, which again, I think is part of the reason why we showed these man traits and skill set pieces, because in that pattern match zone scheme, like we mentioned this offseason, it's essentially playing like man, and all zone regularly turns into man at some point anyway. So knowing that Elam has this in his game, that's really what we wanted to highlight tonight in this episode. And this kicks off our move towards the regular season for, I know it seems ridiculous. It seems like just yesterday the Bills are facing the Chiefs, and then we were talking about the Senior Bowl and all this, but we are officially in May, right? And sadness and cry and tears and all that stuff. But mini camp is coming up. Before we know it, it'll be training camp and St. John Fisher, and then it'll be the preseason and the regular season. Things are going to be ramping up very, very, very fast for the Bills, for the NFL, and also for us here at Cover One. And good question there from Corey, the creator. With the additions we've made, do we feel Frazier mixes the schemes up quite a bit philosophically? I'll answer this one first. I think you see more man coverage used against top tier athletes and mixed in more. Again, we already showed in the beginning that the Bills did use it. I think you see them feel more comfortable to use it in high leverage situations. And I also think you see a little more of Erik. This is something we've talked about going all the way back to last year. The Bills' rules in those 3x1 sets and how they usually like to play man everywhere he goes on that solo receiver. Usually it's Tre'Davious White. And if it's not, they want to give help to that side. Now you have more positional flexibility because you could kick a guy like Elam to that side. It gives you more of a chess piece. So I don't think it changes up the scheme philosophically from the structure or identity, but I think you may see a switch up in terms of ratio of how much man they play or the types of games that they play on the back end.
Yeah, I do think we're going to see some tweaks here and there. I think it's time. I think they've maxed out the scheme in many ways. And after Trey White went down, normally, you know, the Bills are a quarters team. They like to defend deep, let, you know, teams throw underneath and then rally and tackle, keep extending the drive, force them to dink and dunk their way down the field. Well, once Trey White went down, right around, I don't know, the Bucs game, the Panthers game last year, the Bills started changing their quarters coverage rules. Instead of just playing zone over the top, what they were doing with to the passing strength, they were manning up Taron Johnson and Levi Wallace and then playing basically quarter, half on the backside, or just, you know, a cover 2 on that side with Dane Jackson and whatever safety was to that field. So they were mixing and matching some combination coverages because they didn't want to man up one of their all of their corners across the board. So they try to change things a little bit, and then it kind of got them when it came to the run game, because then they're playing all those guys over the top and guys are being run off, and then you're having, you know, Leonard Fournette out the front door on a pinnacle run. So things like that happen even against the Chiefs. So getting a guy like Elam will allow them to just say, you know what, we're either going to play quarters like we normally do, or we're just going to man up. And if they want to play that 2-man like they did against the Chiefs in the divisional round, when Tyreek Hill had that in-breaking route and Levi Wallace was in his pocket, but he just didn't have enough juice to get his hand on the ball. Now you got to have a guy like Elam that's going to be in that hip pocket, and he has the ball skills to make a play on it at the catch point. So I do think we'll see some different things philosophically from Leslie Frazier, and we heard McDermott talk about it earlier in the offseason about it's up to the coaches to kind of make maximize guys like Von Miller, guys that haven't really put his hand in the dirt. Really, he's been a 2-point stance guy. So trying to do some things, you know, up front and on the back end where, hey, we talked about it before going live, guys, right? They're going to be playing some run-heavy teams. And you're not going to be able to play those 2 high shells. You're going to have to more than likely bring a guy, safety down into the box and talk and play those single high looks. And you're going to want to trust your corners on the outside, which they can now if both of these corners are in there. So, yes, we can fully expect some things to be tweaked philosophically.
Anything to add on the philosophical piece of the defense, Kendall?
Not much on the secondary. I think you guys covered that really, really well. But yeah, to emphasize Eric's final point there, I am very intrigued to see what they're going to do on the front 6, front 7. I really want to know what tweaks will be made to maximize Von Miller and then everything around Von Miller. You know, if we're playing Von Miller out wide, what does that mean for the likes of Taron Johnson, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano? Are they going to have to switch up alignments in some ways just to, you know, fill some gaps and some run gaps in that regard? So that's what I'm most intrigued about beyond the secondary portion. I do want to see what tweaks are made to the front 6, front 7.
And that's the real exciting piece, right? Like, again, it all connects. Like, what the Bills are able to do on the back end with Elam isn't just for the secondary or the linebackers in coverage. It also allows the defensive front more opportunities to succeed and play different games, just like a stronger front allows higher chance of success for the back end in games you can play on the back end. It's nice to know the Bills have with Elam, in addition to what they did with Von Miller and kind of revamping and retooling this defensive line again, the Bills have weapons in the defensive arsenal to allow them to match up in a variety of ways against a variety of opponents, stay multiple, and allow them to dictate to offenses, right? That's the big thing in football, especially now, but really forever. Like, is the offense dictating to the defense? Is the defense dictating to the offense? Who is in control? And the Bills now have some versatile pieces that can build for a sustainable way to dictate to offenses, or at the very worst, be reactive in a way that allows them to still succeed. And again, maybe we're still riding off that draft high, but the selection of Kaiir Elam is something that really has a lot of potential and possibilities. And like Kendall, like you said, like that growth piece, right? What it allows for the secondary and the defense as a whole. And that's why we wanted to highlight Kaiir Elam in the way that we did in tonight's episode of the Film Room. And again, really kick off our movement fully towards the regular season now. Like the roster, maybe you see a couple free agent moves here or there, some additions. But what we've got is, I'd say probably like 96, 95% set. And that's the mindset as we start to move forward towards the regular season. I want to thank everyone who joined us live in tonight's episode. The engagement was awesome. The chat was great. The live viewership, it was honestly tremendous. Everybody saying smash the like, all that kind of stuff. I do want to highlight that because likes, as corny as it may seem, are tremendous towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So while you're here, please drop a like on this. If you are watching later, please drop a like. If you're listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review. And either way, YouTube, podcasting apps, whatever have you, please subscribe to the Cover One Film Room. Subscribe to Cover One, the channel. We've got you covered literally every single day of the week with Bills coverage, football coverage, breakdowns, film, high-level stuff, niche stuff, anything and everything you want. Cover One has you. We appreciate you guys so much for your listen, your view, your download, whatever have you. And almost so, Kendall, getting a little teary-eyed. Erik's back. I think it's something that we were very excited for as we talked about potentially doing the film room. And I was like, oh, well, should we do it? And then it was like, no, like we have to do it together. You're back and you're back and the three of us ride again. And what an awesome guy to break down in the film room for, have the three of us back in this, in the film room here to talk about Mr. Kaiir Elam. With that being said, for Mr. Erik Turner, for Mr. Kendall Mursky, for myself, Anthony Prohaska, we are the Cover One Film Room. Thank you very much. We will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.